we might as well get right started. So the first talk is Asa Cameron, Yale University, and Bukhchuluun Dashzeveg.
Not that. No, not that. That's it.
I'm not used to combination for my pronunciation. Christina and Christina, Carolus, and Daniela, Wolin, all from Yale. I've been working with Bill Honeychurch, who's a research associate of the Arctic Studies Center, has been for many years, and a close friend of ours and close colleague in Mongolian studies. So we're really pleased that the Yale group could come down and take part. Otherwise, with me sitting here all by myself, talking to you with no one else. So thank you very much. So their talk is going to be on Shiriin Chuluu during the Late Bronze Age through the Xiongnu Period, results from 2020 to 2022 excavations at Gobi-steppe microregion. So nice one.
Hi, so my name is Asa Cameron, doctoral candidate at Yale University.
Oh, right. I'm Bukhchuluun, Dashzeveg, and a doctoral candidate.
So we're going to be presenting today together. Brett, an introduction, and then
Please talk up.
Yeah,
sorry.
you need to talk up because some of us are older.
So we're going to be presenting together sort of two presentations mashed into one. That provide an introduction, and Bukhchuluun is going to present on his work he's been doing, and then he's going to turn it back over to me, and then I'm going to be presenting on so since 2018, the Shiriin Chuluu Archaeology Project has conducted reconnaissance, pedestrian surveys, and excavations at Shiriin Chuluu, which is a microregion in the Gobi-steppe of southeastern Mongolia, in Dornogov Imig. Our research agenda is centered on documenting mortuary practices from the Late Bronze Age to the Xiongnu Period, and reporting the history of habitation at Shiriin Chuluu from the Neolithic period through the Xiongnu Period. The overarching project aim is to provide a better understanding of the diachronic technological, social, and political changes that occurred across the Gobi-steppe during these periods. So this paper presents results from the 2020 to 2022 field seasons at Shiriin Chuluu. It focuses specifically on three research dimensions. So the excavation and photogrammetric documentation of late Bronze Age and early Iron Age graves. And then second is the recovery of a incised birch bark container from EX 2110 at Zomhekerders, this is the Xiongnu site. And then third, I'm going to be talking about the discovery of domestic dog remains from two Xiongnu period ring graves at Hertzdale and other Xiongnu period 7th grade. And now hand it over to Bukhchuluun, who will cover the first part of this talk.
Thank you, Asa. So, to talk about my work at Shiriin Chuluu, and let's see. So, the Gobi Desert and eastern steppe of Mongolia witnessed the emergence of burial customs during the Late Bronze Age and early Iron Ages, and referred to as the prone burial tradition. This transformation saw people across the region begin to build unique burial structures made of stacked or coarse work stone. On the ground surface, these graves are marked by their hourglass or rectangle shapes, and are of varying sizes. However, all of these graves share a core feature: the deceased is buried in a prone position or on a face-down position. Archaeologists have posited a range of factors to explain the sudden appearance of graves, including the development of social hierarchy, migration, reorganization of local economy, and the establishment of new integrative social institutions, as well as the spread of the early shamanism. While debates still remain ongoing over the origins of this phenomenon, recent studies have provided an increasingly clearer picture as to who these prone people are. We now understand that the people who built these burial monuments possess most, if not all, of the common domestic herd animals that live in Mongolia today, such as goat, sheep, horse, and camel. So that they practice and then develop different tradition as well. And they were engaged in networks of interregional interaction with areas of northern China and southern Siberia. So it's based on the recovery of tripod ceramic vessels, as well as the bronze and semi-precious stone artifacts. So my own research focused on the bronze burial traditions, and it has two broad aims. One is to better understand the nature of the sudden emergence of these new monumental burials during the late Bronze Age, and to clarify relationships between socio-cultural and political and ideological change that occurred in the Gobi during the late Bronze Age. And the subsequent transformation of burial traditions that continued through the early Iron Age. So to address these research aims, we proposed the following question, like how do changes in mortuary investment and practices signal and encourage and support or initiate changes to the broader social order or vice versa. So this is Shiriin Chuluu map, and Shiriin Chuluu is an ideal research location to address this question. So based on our 2018 pedestrian survey, we found 120 late Bronze Age and 21 early Iron Age burials. And today I'm going to talk about more one work conducted during 2021-2022 field season. So with specific focus on cemeteries at Shiriin Chuluu. Hirehat, and Hadesinshan. And the largest prone burials, well, that can be up to the 16 meters in length at Shiriin Chuluu come in hourglass form, so also referred to as shaped burials. These large burials located along the hills between Dashzeveg and Hadesinshan. So as you can see from the map, these shaped burial cemeteries are only located along the western edge of Shiriin Chuluu. The reason for this distribution is presently unclear, but I think it's definitely interesting worth looking at. So this is the Hirehat burial EX2108. And shaped burials in the Gobi typically range from 6 to 9 meters in length and 4 to 5 meters in width. So measuring at 16.2 and 8.5 meters, EX2108 is the biggest burial there. So upon beginning excavation, the team documented a coarse stonework, which we can see from the lower left of the slide, which is about 5 to 6 layers. And then material cultural recovered from this context was very sparse. We only found a few brown gray ceramic sherds in addition to well-defined burial peat, and we identified in the eastern section of this structure, and no human skeletal remains present. The reason for the scalar variation in size noted in Bronze Age shaped monuments across the Gobi is currently not very understood. Such difference in the scale of monuments, monumental investment could indicate the presence of social differentiation among local groups, but do not necessarily indicate a hierarchical social order. At Sakatuguljo, we excavated most of the prone burials, which included bow-shaped and rectangular prone burials, which are also referred to as Odanzo graves. At Sakatuguljo, the prone burials were slightly smaller and ranged from 6 to 8 meters in length and 4 to 5 meters in width. From these smaller graves, we uncovered many artifacts, including ceramic sherds, sheepgoat, cattle, horse bones, as well as stone tools. The recovery of livestock skeletal remains from prone burials is particularly important and useful, as the appearance of prone burials likely coincides with the spread of nomadic pastoralism. The more herd animals remain, we can recover from this burial context, and the more radiocarbon dates we can produce from these materials. So the better our understanding of development in nomadic pastoralism in Mongolia will be. Another significant find we made in the past two field seasons from Sakatuguljo are semi-precious stone beads. These beads provide a key line of evidence to understand mortuary customs during the late Bronze Age, as well as the development of long-distance trade and interaction networks. So as the where's what so this is what we call a carnelian bead made of carnelian nodules from the local area. And at Sakatogorjo, steatite beads seem to be the most ubiquitous artifact type recovered, and they were found in both Wolin and shaped burials. So specifically, excavations at EX2119 yielded 8 steatite beads on a round and human skull in the burial pit, and 13 steatite beads were recovered during the process of sieving burial soil. In burial EX2205, we recovered 38 steatite beads that were distributed at the varying depths and units of the excavation. So, excavations at shaped burial EX2209 and Sakatogorjo yielded steatite beads as well. Well, in addition though, we found 3 carnelian beads outside of the burial pit, which was significantly disturbed in antiquity. Among these artifacts, we recovered the first documented presence of turquoise beads at Shiriin Chuluu. So this included a single turquoise bead from EX2209 and 1 turquoise bead from a living surface at the nearby cave habitation site at Atongordong, which is site number 2208, which Christina will be presenting on later today. The turquoise bead from burial EX2209 was found on the northeastern side of the burial structure at lot 3 of the excavation, and at 6 millimeters in diameter with a 2 millimeters in the diameter hole in the center. It is comparable in size and design to the turquoise bead recovered at Atongordong cave. Based on the radiocarbon dated layers from this habitation site and the similarities in material culture, it is likely that the prone burials and sites like Atongordong are at points contemporaneous. The full range of adornment artifacts recovered from wearing late Bronze Age and Iron Age contacts at Shiriin Chuluu indicate both local and local provenience. The data that they provide are thus directly pertinent to understanding the development and maintenance of both local and interregional exchange networks throughout these periods. And excavations at shaded burial EX2201 from Sakatogorjo again yielded new artifacts type finds as well. So especially 2 pierced bivalve shell pendants, which are most likely fresh water species. So and also recovered at the southern rim of burial pit in association with the prone skeletal remain of a female at advanced stage, about 50 years or older. Following the late Bronze Age, prone burial structures were reused for burial or ritual purposes in the preceding centuries, and the EX2209 and 01 provide interesting case studies of this phenomenon. The western edge of Shiriin Chuluu, as we saw from the previous discussed map, contains a series of low-lying rock hills that run from north to south, and at the end of the bank of the formal lakes. This area is well protected from wind and was an immediate proximity to freshwater sources at various points in the mid to late Holocene. Unsurprisingly, habitation and burial sites have been documented in the area from the Neolithic and period to modern times. So the EX2209, an area of conspicuously loose surface stones was discovered during the excavation. So the examination of this area revealed that the burial structure had been opened at some later time, and that its interior had undergone partial reconstruction. So I'll show you guys a little bigger picture of that burial later. And a line of stones had been erected inside the western part of the enclosure, while a smaller circular feature had been built within the adjoining space. So this was built later, and we found this stone knife in the structure, which is definitely not a Bronze Age artifact. At EX2201, we documented an interesting phenomenon along this east side of the grave. We found the heads of 3 sheep of varying ages, about 16 to 24 month sheep, and then one that is probably 2 to 5 months old, and an infant that is less than 6 months old. So deposited together in a cache. In the burial pit, we found human skeletal remains that radiocarbon dated from 1400 to 1300 BC, and in turn, the 16 to 24-month-old sheep dated to 920 to 824 BC. This provides direct evidence of the insertion of sacrificial livestock remains during the early Iron Age into a late Bronze Age burial feature. The overall prevalence of burial monumental reuse is currently unknown. However, the practices of reusing ancient burials by later generations of people is a phenomenon that has been observed in many cultures throughout history and is something that still happens in Mongolia today. There are several reasons why people may choose to reuse ancient burials, such as ancestral connections, religious or spiritual beliefs, shifting burial traditions, and even some practical considerations. So the final thing I want to talk about is some of the recording methods that we've been using to document our excavation of graves. So this includes GPS, drones, and screens, and employing photogrammetric tools. And in 2022, we introduced the use of an iPad Pro with a LiDAR camera to create high-resolution 3D scans of our excavation process. This has led to a smoother, more precise data collection, and an improved data retention and easier post-processing of data following field work. It also allows us to better explain our findings and excavations in reports and talks. So with the help of the iPad, we made profiled or cross sections of burials, which in the past was really time-consuming thing to do. You would take tape meters and do everything by your hand. So with an iPad or with our iPhone and the LiDAR camera, you can do it within 3 minutes, basically. So this is the burial lands of burial that excavated last year, and you can see the clear how the depth and the structure of the burial, and it's done within 3 minutes, which is great. So the next slide is a tricky one, so just wanted to show a quick. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's the 3D doesn't work in the presenter view, so I just had to come on. So this is a full Bronze Age prone burial. It is it's a really big one compared to the other ones. And to make a drawing or sketch or plan view of that burial usually took half a day or so by hand. But with the drone, not the drone, LiDAR camera, we just scanned it for 3 minutes and processed for 10 minutes. And this is a great way to document the sites. And I guess the good thing, well, the 3Ds have not been very great in terms of in terms of application, but with LiDAR it's onto a scale. So basically there's a centimeter accuracy of the scanning, so you can.
Sorry, yeah. Maybe this is a good place to add. You guys put everything in apps on that, right? Into or those artifacts and phones. Do you also do 3D scan?
Artifacts?
Analyze later.
Yeah, sometimes we do artifact 3D scans so that we can better understand better document the artifacts. Yes. For example, the ship heads that I excavated from EX01, we did the 3D scans, and later it could help ASA to analyze this.
With the sheets, like similar to modern day sheets, or different.
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah, it's the same population. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, same. In fact, there's slightly more genetic variability during the Xiongnu period than this today, but it's the same basically population existed today.
Yeah, and with this, I mean, my presentation is concluding. So now Asa will be talking about his research.
would that be called a slam grave further north? I mean, I've noticed in the slide that you have a lot of slabs around the corner. I mean, that's something that's happening about that same time period.
Yeah, so that's very interesting because of course these prone burials predates slab graves, and the thing about what's really connecting them is that structures. So sometimes we really confuse mounds of burials with those slabs standing with the slab graves, typical slab graves. And we see a change, transformation, or from not transformation, but the change in mortuary practice, but also the next generation of people applying the same method, same technique building burials, which is applied in Bronze Age and slab graves.
Burying people
And sometimes burying their own people within the burials, the older ones.
Yeah.
Quick question. You showed slide of your iceberg. There on the corner picture was some eggshell. Was it eggshell?
Oh no, it was not eggshell. It's a seashell. No, freshwater shell.
Oh, fresh water.
Yeah.
Oh.
This one?
No, you keep going over artifacts. First, what was that upper right corner? That one.
Oh, the ball?
Yeah, up, right up.
that's
Oh, is it the
ceramic.
ceramic?
Those are ceramics, yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That's interesting. Professional. I mean, I just keep in very.
We do get ostrich eggshells from other sites, from Neolithic sites or Stone Age sites. Yeah, yeah. That was this. Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to turn to a portion of this talk. I'll tell you about two interesting finds, basically they're divided maybe in the past two field seasons at two different sites, so some Period. So just very briefly, in case the people in the audience aren't terribly familiar with Mongolian periods of archaeological history. So the Xiongnu period is about 250 BC to 150 AD. So it corresponds with the first Nomadic empire state that existed in Eastern Eurasia. And it's really important because it's this foundational, essentially, period that a lot of subsequent empires are based on. So the Mongols actually draw their military formations from the Xiongnu, which is like 1,000 years probably. So they're basically really important to understand. So the first discovery comes from EX 2110 from Zomekerders, which is a centrally located Xiongnu period cemetery with 18 ring graves. So Xiongnu ring graves are what we think of as the graves essentially of the local elites. There's two different styles of Xiongnu burial. One are these large platformed royal tombs, which can be upwards of 18 meters in depth. They're ramped and have tapestries and all this amazing material. The stuff that most people are on, myself included, are these ring graves, which are identified as rings, essentially on the surface, and are usually about 5 meters in diameter, but some can go up to 14 meters in diameter, and are usually about 2 to 3 meters. So in EX 2110, so at about 1.5 meters, we encountered the outline of a stone cyst on top of a latticed wooden coffin lid, which you can see here. So our team revealed an additional wooden coffin lid constructed from solid planks laid over a narrow wooden coffin that contained human skeletal remains from an adult laid in a supine position as opposed to a prone position that's orientated inwards. So this is very common for essentially ring graves. So at the west, the northern end of the coffin, we found the remains of a ceramic vessel and this birch bark box. So after the field season, the birch bark box was brought to the Institute of Archaeology in Ulaanbaatar. Our curator, Dashzeveg, stabilized and restored this container. And during the process, we were able to extract and document the contents of the birch bark box, which was a broken bronze mirror wrapped in silk, which Dashzeveg was also able to restore.
Could you speak just a little louder?
Yep, sorry. So basically, I'm just showing you essentially, we recovered this birch bark box and we brought it back to the Capitol, worked with someone who does essentially artifact restoration. So I'm going to show you basically this process. It's pretty amazing. But through this, we were also able to essentially extract the contents of the box, which was this bronze mirror, which was wrapped in silk. Let's see if this works. Okay. Okay, so this is the birch bark box after restoration. So to give you a sense of essentially all the designs there.
Is that later?
This is after the restoration. So this is the work essentially not since they did for us. So which is pretty amazing. Is there's birch bark. Yeah, it's tree bark. Yeah. So there's more or less only 2 other items like this have ever been found, of which we only have 1 radiocarbon for. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what's actually on the box and why these designs are interesting, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I want to turn to the design of the container, provide some analysis of it, and see how it compares to similar iconography. So as I mentioned, there are only 2 other examples of incised birch bark boxes from the Xiongnu period we've been able to find. The first comes from Mound 7 at Sarum in the Transbaikal region of Russia. So this is a royal cemetery. So at Sarum, 4 birch bark containers were actually found, 3 of which have incised designs on them, 2 of which are pictured here. So the containers were found in a royal platform tomb as opposed to a ring grave. And were not actually buried with human remains, but instead were deposited as grave offerings associated with 4 dummies or faux people that they'd actually buried in this royal tomb. So similar to EX2110, at least one of the birch bark boxes from Sarum contain a bronze mirror wrapped in fabric. And as for designs, as you can see, there are still obvious parallels. So the Sarum container shows a camp scene with gares. And 2-wheeled carts with flying banners that are essentially moving in profile. These guys here are carts essentially with banners that are moving in profile. These are ours over here, but they have different style banners. And these are gares. They actually have gares moving on carts, so wheeled, essentially, homes. So what's particularly important about this is we don't have very good archaeological or direct evidence of when essentially mobile domiciles were invented. And this is really the best sort of evidence we have. Because a lot of the other evidence is very, well, I'll say the stuff from Yale. Essentially, if you were trying to identify this archaeologically, it'd be very difficult. You might get a ring structure, and then you would get a distribution of artifacts outside of that ring structure, from which you might infer that there was a gare present. But this is pretty undisputably a gare. It's very similar to what modern gares look like, just again very cool for us.
You don't know the gears. I mean, this lattice pattern is very typical for the slats, the lattice to make the walls.
So the other instance of essentially incised birch bark boxes being found in Xiongnu context comes from graves 51 and 79 at Bukhchuluun Tolgoi. So this is basically the best studied and most well understood Xiongnu ring grave cemetery in existence. And it's in the northern far steppe of Mongolia and on Balkan Islands. So these 2 lids, so they don't actually have birch bark essentially containers, they just have the lids from them. So these are, drawings. I couldn't find a good image of the actual lids. There's a lot of essentially pictures of the depictions of what were on. So these two lids show a series of two-wheeled carts, none of which seem to be in the style of EX 2110, as they lack the latticing you can see in parts D, G, and H of the illustration. So if you look, you can see the same latticing that's going on in the gear in section A is actually happening in the carts as well. So these are essentially the containers. Essentially, this would be the area that people would actually be riding in, where this latticing is, which these do not have. So there's multiple different types of vehicles that are being depicted in these containers. So outside of birch bark, there are several petroglyphs that show carts, including these two. Here you can see two different sets of two-wheeled carts with flying banners. Again, with this picture's not great, but again with even different styles of banners than the ones that are on ours and the one that's on Sarum. So this might relate to, ethnic identity, personal identity. We don't really know, but obviously the banners are important and actually hold some part of identity of who's actually probably riding this. Okay, so the one on the left likely shows two carts either approaching or leaving a gare, and the one on the right shows two cattle-drawn carts. So the paired imagery of two carts with banners, as you've seen from Sarum and 2110, as well as it's a common motif of this type of vehicle depiction. So these rock art plans also show an important feature of this type of cart imagery, that being that only sometimes animals are shown pulling the carts. And the reason for this is not known. Next, I want to turn to our preliminary interpretation of what this full scene actually is showing. So if you look at section F of the diagram, there's strong parallel between it and the geometric designs found on some coffins that have been recovered from Xiongnu ring graves, such as this one from here in Haldiming. So it's possible that parts of you have this X essentially on the coffin itself, which you can see here. You have these cross beam designs here, and then these planks that are actually holding the coffin together on the other side. Another thing to note is, so it's not all, but some of the coffins are definitely just converted carts that we've seen too. So there's definitely sort of a mix between those two things. So it is possible that part F depicts another type of vehicle, possibly a sled, given that it doesn't show, we don't have any wheels on it. So we want to argue that the design more closely resembles a wooden coffin actually placed on top of a vehicle. So if you look at parts D, F, G, and H, you can see there are yokes or step-like features at the base of the carts on either side of the vehicle compartments. So these things. And this is a really common feature of this type of motif. But if you actually look at part F, the part we think of it as the coffin is actually sitting above and sort of over top of these essentially steps. Unlike every other instance of where you actually have a cart, where these steps essentially would have allowed someone to get into a compartment. That's not what you have here. Right, so it's basically possible, we want to argue this is probably a coffin essentially being pulled by a vehicle or maybe a sled. So given this, we argue that it's possible the scene is showing a funerary procession, moving right to left. And this idea can be given slightly more credence by the fact that the Hohanshu, or the later book of the Han, has a passage that describes the burial practice of the Bukhchuluun, a contemporary nomadic group of the Xiongnu that occupied parts of Manchuria, and according to historic sources, were defeated by the Xiongnu and made a vassal. So they were part of the Xiongnu. And you have explicitly the scene described of carts moving in a funerary procession with flying banners. So finally, I want to address parts B, C, and E of the drawing. So part E, we found was mostly scratches that were impossible to interpret. In part B, we again couldn't really find an analog for it, and at present are really uncertain about what it could be. So this part, for part C though, there's sort of several interesting similarities between it and features found in ancient and modern designs associated with shamanism. So from the rock art from Lake Baikal, you can see here. So you can see the chevron pattern on this shamanistic being. The art is sort of colloquially referred to as X-ray style, as it seems to depict a rib cage, sort of noting the shaman's connection between the realms of the living and the dead. And this same design is somewhat mimicked in aspects of late Bronze Age deer stones in Mongolia, specifically the image in the middle of the slide, which is often thought of to represent a shield. And then finally on the right, these masks are found throughout Mongolia and are often tied to Bronze Age, to the Bronze Age and also to ritual practices and early shamanism. So this mask has branching horns on either side, which at least partially resemble branches growing out of the top of, let's see, what these guys. And I'll show you sort of some other imagery that captures that. So some of these themes can carry over to modern shamanism in Eastern Eurasia. So on the far left, you can see the depiction of a Tuvan shaman adorned with the same X-ray style ribcage as shown in the petroglyphs. Next to it is a modern female shaman costume from the Orken autonomous banner in far eastern Inner Mongolia. The costume depicts the world tree on the back of it. So this right here. Which is a key feature of many shamanistic beliefs across Eurasia. Since world tree symbolism is one possible interpretation of what Part C could represent. And if you look at the hat of the costume, it too has branching horns similar to essentially the mask petroglyph. In addition to this costume, at the Cultural Museum where it is held, they have a large collection of birch bark containers. So this area has a very long history of essentially making things out of birch bark, including this one on the right, which depicts what they describe as a shaman box, which also contains tree branch imagery similar to Part C, and also bumps, which appear in Part B of EX 2110. So we're currently working on an article on this artifact, and we're still in the process of working on the details of this. So basically, if anyone has any ideas or suggestions, please let us know. So these are sort of just our very early ideas about what it possibly could be showing. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the dogs we found, and how they compare to similar finds again, and sort of discuss what this can tell us about dogs during the Xiongnu period. So this is Hertzdell, so it's a small Xiongnu ring grave cemetery with only 4 burials. In 2022, we excavated the middle 2 graves here labeled EX 2102 and EX 2203. So our excavations at Hertzdell began at EX02. The grave was disturbed in the human and livestock. In this case, the remains of 4 goats, 2 sheep, and a horse. And dog skeletal remains were distributed throughout the burial. We recovered a near complete dog skeleton from this context, except for minor portions of the ribs, limbs, and skull. In addition, we recovered human remains from 2 individuals, so isolated elements from an adult of indeterminate sex, and a skull and postcranial remains of a probable middle adult, so 35 to 50-year-old male. And sort of somewhat interestingly, we also recovered the forelimb with the left metatarsal of a Mongolian gazelle in this grave, and the skeleton of a badger, probably an Asian badger, although I'm pretty sure the badger is intrusive and just burrowed into the grave at a later time, but we don't have radiocarbon dates, so possibly a Xiongnu badger. Seemingly. So based on the recovery of a fused tibia from the dog, we know that it was an adult of at least 1.5 years old. Based on the lack of a baculum, which is a penis bone, the dog is a probable female. And finally, based on the measurements of so upper maxillary teeth in comparison against other Xiongnu dogs, specifically from the Volga Fortress site in Trans-Baikal, as well as modern Siberian wolves, we were able to make the determination the strains were Canis familiaris, or a dog, as opposed to Canis lupus. This is sort of a big distinction that you obviously need to make if you want to talk about these as dogs. I'm sure they're actually dogs. For EXO3, the south end burial, we found what prompted really this portion of the talk. So we found a nearly complete and articulated dog skeleton. This dog was positioned with its head to the north in a stone circle above a stone-lined cyst that was in the burial pit. As you can see from this image, the dog seemed to have been folded or bundled before being placed in the stone circle based on the position of the left forelimb and left hind limb, which were crossed. So when we initially excavated this, I thought these were essentially the front two limbs, and it was placed like this, sort of spread out. But this is actually the back leg. This is the front leg. So it's actually positioned like this. So it looked like they literally bundled it up and put it in its own little stone circle and then placed it above essentially the stone coffin of the human, with livestock remains to the north of the grave and the dog above and to the south of the grave. And sort of somewhat interestingly is, like we go super about details about this, but what's sort of interesting with the dog remains is unlike every other animal that's sacrificed and interred in Xiongnu remains, these are usually interred whole as opposed to butchered and probably consumed. So it's a clear distinction essentially between dogs and other livestock, and a clear distinction based on their actual placement. And so here you can see from the east profile of the excavation, and this EXO3, in the stone circle underneath the dog after the skeletal remains present in level 5 removed. Not a great picture, but this is essentially the stone circle where the dog was laid. So the dog was deposited approximately 1 meter below the ground surface at the south end of the burial. And so the burial itself contained the skull and postcranial remains of a young adult female, so 20 to 35 years old, along with the remains of a cow, 2 sheep, and 2 goats. For the EXO3 dog, it is 36 to 48 months old based on wear patterns of the mandibular or the first lower molar. And similar to EXO2, the dog is possibly female based on the lack of a baculum. And we made the same Canis familiaris versus Canis lupus distinction based on the Volga and the modern Siberian wolf. So in terms of Xiongnu sites, so far we've been able to find evidence for dogs at 10 cemeteries and 4 habitation sites. So the distribution is spread out across the middle portions of modern Mongolia and into Transbaikal, but more heavily concentrated in the north in the forest steppe regions. So the most in-depth analysis of Xiongnu period dogs to date comes from the Volga. So it's a fortress settlement and cemetery site that's located in Transbaikal, as I mentioned, along the Xiongnu River. So research at this site actually dates back to Sosnovsky in the 1920s. But most recently, excavations were carried out of Volga in 2017. So in 2021, Sisnovo produced a morphometric analysis of 10 dog skulls from the Volga. So 9 of which were excavated in the 50s, and 1 which was recovered in 2017. And she compared measurements of these dogs against 7 East Siberian mica skulls recovered from the 1920s, as well as other archaeological dog skulls recovered from Mesolithic and Neolithic contexts around Baikal and the Amur region. So Sisnova found essentially the Volga dogs closely resemble East Siberian Lycas, and that there was no statistically significant difference in the measurements between the two. So whether they're really this breed or not is up for debate, but they probably very, very closely resemble these dogs. Let's see. So in 2020, Amentiev analyzed the faunal remains recovered in the 2017 excavations. And this analysis provided direct evidence for dog consumption, at least at this site, based on butchery networks. And this is something that's sort of only been suggested for some other sites that the dog remains have been found. This is really the only site we have that probably some people cite are eating dogs at some point, but probably not in great numbers. So this Zoark analysis found that 5.6% of the assemblage, based on the number of identified specimens, or NISP, which is the acronym for it, came from dogs. So this number is interesting because it's in contrast to the original analysis of faunal remains, based on the 1920s and 1950s assemblage, which found a significantly higher concentration of dog remains. Specifically, they found dog remains from at least 54 individuals, and originally reported that 29% of the assemblage, or the largest portion of any sort of species out of Volga, was actually dog. So for a very, very long time, we thought nearly 30% of the essentially animal bones recovered from the site were only coming from dogs. And then sort of finally in 2018, OC dated 6 of the Volga dogs as part of a larger study of dogs in the archaeological record of Transbaikal. And these dates vary quite a bit, but point to the continuous presence of dogs at the Volga from at least the 3rd century BC to 1st century AD. So the archaeological evidence from mortuary sites shows a somewhat varied picture. So dog remains have been recovered from within the burial pit, directly on top of human remains, on top of the coffin cover, to the south and southwest of the stone coffin, above and to the south of the stone coffin, and in one instance, they're actually mixed in with the cache of livestock remains to the north of the grave pit. But generally speaking, it seems that most dogs were interred whole, positioned with their heads to the north, in the flexed or bundled position. And both adult and puppy remains have been recovered from Xiongnu ring graves. And the dogs have been recovered from both male and female human remains. So there doesn't seem to be any correlation between gender identity or sex and dogs. There doesn't really seem to be a adult versus puppy distinction either that's going on. And there's quite a lot of variability in how they're actually depositing and where they're involved. So far, 5 ring graves with dogs have been radiocarbonated. So EX0602 from Shiriin Chuluu, or BGC, dates to 359 to 55 BC. 2 graves in Bukhchuluun, which I mentioned previously, date 152 BC to 9 AD, 154 to 24 AD. And the 2 graves that we excavated date to 46 BC to 73 AD and 102 BC to 26 AD, respectively. So these dates fit well with the dates so far from the Volga at first glance. And although based on a very small sample size, the dates possibly indicate that the sacrifice of dogs is an earlier phenomenon rather than a later phenomenon during the Xiongnu period, and that possibly the practice spreads from the forest steppe southward. Although we obviously need to excavate and radiocarbonate more dog remains to really test this. And then finally, so one of the ways we can better understand Xiongnu dog remains is to look at examples, Mongolian Transbaikal, that predate the Xiongnu period. So this early evidence of canid sacrifice in mortuary context in this region comes from bundled dogs and wolves excavated around Lake Baikal that date to the late Mesolithic through the Middle Neolithic. I don't know if you can actually this. But basically 8,000 to 4,000 BC, there's a lot of dog sacrifice going on and wolf sacrifice around the Lake Baikal region. But after that, instances of dog sacrificing graves becomes really scarce up until the Xiongnu period starts. In the West, this same pattern can be seen in Mongolia as well. In the West, there's one example of an Afanasyevo site, so about 3,000 to 25, or 3,000 BC to 2,500 BC. And this group is the first pastoralists, essentially, in Eastern Eurasia, and sort of the group that introduces metallurgy to Eastern Eurasia. So we have one instance of Afanasyevo dog sacrifice, the jungle hole in Byrus-Lycan, excavated in 2018. The mandible, which is pictured in here. In the Altai, Alexei Kovalyev reported 2 Chemerchek period cemeteries with dog, wolf, and one instance of a wolverine sacrifice, all in a flexed or bundled position. So the Chemerchek is about 2,500 BC to 2,000 BC, so sort of the subsequent period to the Afanasyevo. So it seems to be a little bit more common, the Chemerchek, than the Afanasyevo. But after that, we could only find one instance of dog remains recovered from a grave that predated the Xiongnu period. And it comes from a slab grave, so the later early Iron Age graves that Bukhchuluun was describing. And this was excavated in Dornonamik by Naban in the 1960s. So what this punctuated distribution shows is that the relationship between humans and dogs, and likely the importance of dogs, changed through time in Mongolia. in relation to changing belief systems, forms of organization, possibly subsistence practices. Why the Xiongnu period seemingly corresponds to the revival of this burial practices is unclear, but this is a topic we'll explain in greater detail in the future. Thank you.
Can you compare them to immediately Bukhchuluun material from the Arctic? You know, a lot of 8,000-year-old dogs.
Yeah. So the WOSI articles, as mentioned, it's around like 5 or 6 articles. Basically, mostly about the Arctic dogs and the Baikal dogs, and really just comparing all of the super early dog remains that we have. So it's mostly pulling on those for identification purposes, just making sure that the wolf remains that they had weren't similar to the dog remains that we had.
You mentioned that there were disturbances in the sites for the dogs, but not in the other sites that play into your.
I mean, almost all the sites were disturbed. It's very, very, very uncommon to find a disturbed site. The site I mentioned, Shiriin in Halfdamig, it had that coffin. The website was seemingly similar to that depiction. That site is actually not disturbed. It's full into the stuff, but other than that, I can't too many sites that are.
So the map distribution shows that tries to say during the the border of Mongolia, have they done no studies beyond the borders or
So there's
the geographical features?
there's good evidence. I mean, China has a really long history of dog sacrifice as well. That's particularly in the Xiongnu period. So 1600 to about 1000 BC. So I didn't include that because otherwise this talk would go on. But it's also possible that trying to figure out the direction of where practices are coming from. I mean, it's also one possibility as well. The reason at present I don't think that's the case is just because the way that the dogs are actually interred in these Chinese graves, they're not in a bundled position. They're usually sort of like almost in an anatomical position. And they're not really they're not placed in the same spots as well. So it doesn't seem to be similar, but some of the Xiongnu Royal Cemetery features definitely come from the ramp tombs that you see in China as well. So it's not as if they aren't borrowing certain ideas from them, but I don't think the dog sacrifice is like this. Yep.
So, actually, two questions, one for you, one for Bukhchuluun. I'm gonna ask both of you guys decide what we're gonna do it. Do you typically, other than the birch box, what did you find that was most interesting or surprising? I think it was pretty nice. And for Bukhchuluun, it's a more technical one. I'm curious. The iPad LiDAR touch, that's something that your team put together to design, and something that's off the shelf. Because that's a fascinating thing that I've not heard about before. I'm kind of curious where it came from.
Sure. So the most interesting thing I found as I was excavating.
Interesting versus surprising.
It's probably both of those two things. But so my research is really geared to reconstructing ancient herding practices. So I study animal bones. I work with bone chemistry to sort of reconstruct diet and mobility patterns in the past. So the weeds a bit, but one of the interesting things that I've been finding, so I've been reconstructing whether humans and whether the livestock specifically and dogs are local or non-local to the area, using specifically strontium isotopes. So what we found so far is those dogs aren't local. They're not local dogs. They're not from the area. What that means is still trying to work that out. One of the graves from Hertzdale that had the dog remains probably isn't local, and the woman that was excavated had that fully articulated dog. 100% is not a local grave. So, yeah.
Do you find any ancient graves being destroyed by all the years?
Yeah.
Because I do remember when I was a kid back in the 70s in the countryside, we see lots of graves. You can see it from a distance, because it's round and with the stone, there were lots of them, but I don't see it now in the countryside. So I think like in 90s, lots of gold figures, they just destroyed so many of it, right?
Yeah, it's a really big issue. And where we are too, there's a the borax. What's the mine? Like there's a
Parable?
No.
the actual yeah the actual mineral.
Feldspar.
Feldspar. So there's a feldspar mine at Shiriin Chuluu where we actually work. So when we first went there in 2017 and we did survey in 2018, so it was just walking the landscape and just taking pictures of what you see and getting GPS pointing and taking some really basic measurements. So in that field season, we documented all of the essentially looting we could find, and we wrote a report and gave it to the police and with the local governor. But it's unless you have people like constantly monitoring it, it's really hard to deter people. We actually literally ran into looters when we were surveying, which I don't think they realized we were archaeologists at first, because they immediately came up to us and started talking to us.
They accused us being, looters, and, oh, you are looters. I'm like, no, you are looters. Yeah, but unfortunately, police, we reported that, and police actually, well, there's a law, cultural heritage protection law that's, serving in protection of the cultural heritage in Mongolia. But it's still good. It's much better than it used to be now. But even with that cultural law, people still manage to loot. And most of the times, the looters are it's just hard to say, but it's local people, because the looted burials or the sites are usually the ones that is hard to find for bypassers. So it's most of the times we know that it's the local people who are doing this.
The police are not always enthusiastic about tracking them down, or, but a lot of them, at least where we've been working on it,
Yeah.
they know who's doing this work.
But now it used to be like 100,000 rupees or 300,000 rupees a fine if you loot an ancient site. But now it's a jail term, 5 years of jail time. So it's much harsher.
Yeah,
So,
we enforce.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And answering to LiDAR question, LiDAR in phones were integrated or were introduced by Apple since the iPhone 12 Pro, which is like three years ago, and since with the LiDAR cameras being on the phone, people started making applications for 3D creations. And 3D is used for documenting, houses and many other things, and it's being used for archaeology quite recently. And we're probably the early adapters of this technology of LiDAR technology. So if you have the iPhone or iPad with the right camera and with the LiDAR, so you can just get the application for free, and you can start scanning and doing your project yourself.
Cool, thank you. While we're into Yale and Gobi, do you have another question?
Yeah, very quick.
Yeah.
So, in terms of dog and wall to measurement comparisons, and I'd like to say, in addition to that, have you looked at morphological data? Because those measurement, is that really sufficient to say, the difference of those? I mean, you have enough data, enough samples to support the pattern.
Yeah.
Dogs rather than
So
wall.
yeah, the comparative studies I was talking about being measured. The Volga context, they have almost complete skeletons. We have as well, but they're basically not intact well enough to really measure the proportions we really need. And especially for EXO2, it was basically just a bunch of loose teeth that I have. I couldn't measure the orbital angle, which is sort of the classic. There's essentially an angle which dogs, their eye socket meets the back of their head. If you measure at the right angle, the wolves don't, so they have a different angle. And I didn't have that part to measure. But what I looked at is all the tooth measurements that people have had used, and you can basically can make cutoff points. So if it's below a certain point, you can be pretty certain that it's a dog and not a wolf. And so I had a bunch of measurements that basically just weren't in the range of wolf movements. They were way too small for an adult wolf.
So when you see like a living dog walking around, does your mind automatically go to, okay, how would I dissect it? How would I take it apart? This part's wolfish, and then, or do you?
Didn't until this past summer. It's the first time I ever found dog remains. I usually just work with livestock remains. It's kind of what like sheep and goat is my kind of, I'd say. Yeah, I can.
Face down area, so that's unique to that company, or is that received?
Yes, that's only unique to late Bronze Age in the Gobi. The Gobi, actually, this is the first monumental burials in the Gobi that we see. It's starting around 1500 BC. And then it just suddenly changes into another burial type, which is called slab graves. And the transition is at Shiriin Chuluu is actually very clear. The latest stone burial we see there is around 900 BCE. So which is the it's going between around 1500 BC to 900 BC, and then from that period, from 900, we see slab graves they'll being built. And which is what is really interesting about them is they're using the same kind of not technology, but the structure of burials. So sometimes there has been a lot of discussions like whether those prone burials and slab graves are the same people or not, and slab graves are being descendants of ancestors of the Bukhchuluun. So I think we see a very clear transition from each type of burial within the same population.
Christine, is it okay for you to go now? I thought probably you should.
This circle stones, that's kind of circle, and then also this cross pyramids, this big dominant, and also the triangle, I guess, I don't know, it's the rib cage. So what the reasoning that the symmetry in like seems is commonly pattern occurring pattern on the direction of shape is like as the research in the field that is the stands for interpretation from Xiongnu or just from the
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the interpretations come from modern shamanism, and really, sort of that X-ray style or the rib cage. Usually, these are the sort of representing that shaman has this sort of relationship between the realm of living and the realm. It's part of like the medium between the two, and it's incredibly hard to sort of interpret some of these meanings with rock art that's 2,000, 3,000 years old. But it's you can draw like almost a very clear line between these designs going back thousands of years. People are still using the same designs, so probably similar.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. So Chris, we'll